Welcome to our Sunday service at the First Church in Chestnut Hill on May 17, 2020. Welcome if this is your first time, or welcome once again. We begin with two readings. The first is from Psalm 66. Bless our God, O peoples, let the sound of his praise be heard, who has kept us among the living and has not let our feet slip. For you, O God, have tested us. You have tried us as silver is tried. You brought us into the net. You laid burdens on our backs. You let people ride over our heads. We went through fire and through water, yet you have brought us out to a spacious place. I will come into your house with burnt offerings. I will pay you my vows, those that my lips uttered and my mouth promised when I was in trouble. I will offer to you burnt offerings of fatlings with the smoke of the sacrifice of lambs. I will make an offering of bulls and goats. Come and hear, all you who fear God, and I will tell you what he has done for me. I cried aloud to him, and he was extolled with my tongue. If I had cherished iniquity in my heart, the Lord would not have listened. But truly God has listened. He has given heed to the words of my prayer. Blessed be God, because he has not rejected my prayer or removed his steadfast love from me. The second reading is from the book of Genesis, chapter 11, verses 1 to 9. Now the whole earth had one language and the same words. And as they migrated from the east, they came upon a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. And they said to one another, Come, let us make bricks, and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone, and bitumen for mortar. Then they said, Come, let us build ourselves a city, and a tower with its top in the heavens. And let us make a name for ourselves, otherwise we shall be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth. The Lord came down to see the city and the tower which mortals had built. And the Lord said, Look, they are one people, and they have all one language. And this is only the beginning of what they will do. Nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language, so that they will not understand one another's speech. So the Lord scattered them abroad from there over the face of the earth, and they left off building the city. Therefore it was called Babel, because the Lord confused the language of all the earth, and from there the Lord scattered them abroad over the face of all the earth.
Be thou my vision, O Lord of my heart, not be all else to me, save that thou art. Thou my best thought by day or by night, waking or sleeping, thy presence my light. Be thou my wisdom, and thou my true word. I ever with thee, and thou with me, Lord. Thou my great Father, and I thy true Son. Thou in me dwelling, and I with thee one. Riches I heed not, nor man's empty praise. Thou mine inheritance now and always. Thou and thou only, first in my heart. O King of glory, my treasure thou art. High King of heaven, my victory won, may I reach heaven's joys, O bright heaven's sun. Heart of my own heart, whatever befall,
What did we hear? Come, let us build a city and a tower with its top in the heavens. This passage comes after the story of Noah. The people have repopulated the area and they come together speaking one language, living in one place. And so they begin to build a city, then a tower. Unfortunately, this grand building project would get them in trouble. God was concerned about their upward striving, and so they were scattered across the face of the earth. Their efforts now frustrated, they stopped building. These people were confounded, and so the place was called Babel, otherwise known as Babylon. Well, the story of the Tower of Babel is unusual in the book of Genesis. It is a standalone account that does not have any characters besides God. A bunch of people got together and they were building a tower to heaven. This worried God, they were punished. The theme of punishment aside, the story doesn't really fit in with the rest of Genesis. The people were never told, don't build a tower like that. They had no indication that they were doing anything wrong. The account of God comes off as rather petty, as if God should be anxious about a tower that was made out of brick and hot top. The Babylonian choice for mortar was bitumen, which is naturally occurring asphalt, in case you were wondering. The story is about pride, about hubris, about trying to become like the gods. And I use the plural term because this is a very common story across cultures. Someone tries to climb too high and they suffer the consequences. But it doesn't fit into the Bible because God generally doesn't deal with faceless groups, but with a person. There is a righteous person, there is a messenger, there is a prophet. There is occasionally a person being punished, but it's a person. Here it's a blanket punishment for everyone without a redeeming example of what good behavior looks like. Even if it was the building project that was the problem, why would God not want us to be able to speak to one another? That solution presents even greater problems. The story seeks to offer an explanation about why there are so many languages, so many people. The story tries to answer the question of why, but it skates over why it was necessary. Language is a fascinating invention. Over thousands of years, people in various areas of the world came to rough agreement about what to call things. Think about that. Languages are intertwined and they frequently borrow from each other, but on a basic level, they are about random sounds chosen to mean something. And whether you choose the word yes or da or we or si to imply agreement, a bunch of people had to get together to agree that that was the word. Language is therefore a shared project. It's a group of people getting together and agreeing what to name the objects of the world around them. It's a miracle that people could ever come to such an agreement about such a fundamental thing. And it may in part explain why there is often disagreement among people, among cultures, among countries. When you have one agreement over here, it may be difficult to let someone from over there in. That's someone who doesn't speak the same way, who doesn't think the same way, if you can call it that. Language is therefore an enormous barrier. Which must mean that those who speak the same language sit around all day agreeing with each other. Sarcasm alert. Of course, that's not true. Language is one common aspect of culture, of community. It's only one source. The people of England are not the same as the people of Canada or Australia. They share some cultural influences, they maintain certain mutual social elements, but they're not the same. In the same way, someone from New England may sound or act differently than someone from Texas or Wisconsin or California. Do they think differently as well? Would they decide matters differently from others? If so, how deeply are those variations embedded in these regions? We are spread out over a vast nation. We have different climates, different linguistic patterns of speech, different ethnic backgrounds, and mixtures. And then combine with that academic backgrounds, service in the military, religious traditions, city versus country, and so forth. We are a national Tower of Babel, broken up into 50 states and 50,000 or so overlapping and squabbling social groups. It's amazing we ever get anything done. This is not an entirely new situation for our society. And speaking as an urban-born, overeducated, second-generation Italian-American divorced father from the greater Boston area, it's a minor miracle that I can cobble together a sentence coherent enough in thought or language for you all to comprehend. I do try. I occasionally succeed. I mention this diversity of culture and language and thinking because we often worry that as a nation, as a people, we have many problems communicating. Is it any wonder? We cannot assume that there is some grand category like American that will easily smooth over all the differences between us, among us. Well, what about shared history? That observation may have worked until about the year 1800. And even then, it was a judgment about a bunch of English troublemakers building a new life on someone else's land. But after that early point in history, the United States grew increasingly further away from common roots. Who gets added to the mix? How do they fit in? You have Irish Catholic immigrants enduring a famine, Eastern European Jews fleeing from persecution, you've got Italians and Mexicans and Chinese looking for opportunity, Somalians and Syrians and Guatemalans just trying to survive. And how do you factor in the suffering of Native Americans? How do you consider the legacy of African American slaves? There's no quick or easy way of homogenizing all those people with all those experiences together. It's probably not even a good idea. The diversity of cultures is enriching, it's enlivening, it's at least not boring. And over time, people who come to the United States become enmeshed in a greater social enterprise, the civic engagement of just trying to make decisions together. These people who remain come to identify with their new home to some degree. But that emerging identity need not be created at the expense of all culture, old culture, new culture. That evolution of identity also requires that those already here make room for them, physically and socially. But you might ask, why do I need to change? I was here first. Really? Really? Honestly, if you went back 10,000 years to after the last great ice age, maybe there would have been a moment that someone stepping across the continent could have not had to deal with neighbors. So unless you crossed a land bridge across the Bering Sea, that thought process is problematic. Any time afterwards, any moment over thousands of years later, entry into this particular geographic area was about conflict and struggle, conquest and strife. And that was no different when this nation was created. One group of people decided that they were in charge, kicking out the other people who claimed to be in charge and pushing aside the people who were already here. That chain of authority has somehow held up for 2 centuries. Over those many years, new groups have come, some easily, some with great difficulty. Some have assimilated, others to varying degrees. Old standing tensions remain and have never been fixed. And whether that's about race or ethnicity, broken treaties, or social animosities, there are some problems. The story of the Tower of Babel does not belong in the Bible, in my humble opinion. It was gathered together with a lot of other stories, like One More Curiosity tucked away in Grandma's attic. Nonetheless, it is a familiar story. It does not make sense in the Bible because the confusion among the people of the world, that has nothing to do with God. It has to do with the people, in my humble opinion. We are right and they are wrong. My language, my culture, my way of doing things is better. So suck it up, Buttercup, if you plan on sticking around here. A not so humble opinion. The Tower of Babel is about pride, and that is the most dangerous sin of all. Because pride can be the downfall of anyone. I can be scrupulously honest and brag about it. I can be kind and compassionate and never let you forget it. I can be everything good in the world and still act like a jerk because I think I'm just that good. Pride is like a tower reaching up to the heavens, as if one was God. So maybe the story does belong in the Bible, just don't blame God about it. And so these towers of pride we build up to the heavens, they will eventually fall down, inevitably fall down. Not because God is trying to punish us, but because that's not how you go about reaching God. We're building it all wrong. You cannot build a tower up to heaven and hope to become like God. That's actually the wrong direction. Instead of tall towers, instead of vanity projects of brick and mortar, glass and steel, you have to build bridges. You have to build bridges between people in this world. Bridges across language and culture, bridges across religions and ethnicities, bridges across all the differences in the world. And those are not bridges made of stone or steel. They are built from budding understanding, a growing sense of trust, and therefore they are not easy to build. They take time, they take effort, they take generations. In our country, we have many differences. Those differences are political, philosophical, and cultural, as well as religious, ethnic, and racial. For much of the history of this country, the way to address those differences was to try and eliminate them. Stop being who you are, who you were, and start acting and speaking and thinking like we do, like I do. Again, not only is that hard to bring about, it's not even a good idea to do so. It is a fortress mentality. Build up a bunch of walls, and we never need to change. But you always need to change. That's in the nature of living. We are changing because some new way is more efficient, it's more effective, it's more interesting. We are changing because we need to evolve, we need to progress, we need to survive. Need to, meaning no choice but to. Over the coming months and years, we are faced with some challenges, ones that our nation may never have really anticipated. We can dig in our heels and not change a thing, not adapt our behavior, not take the advice that we're being given about this new reality. Or we can make the changes necessary and advisable to keep us safe and healthy in a time of pandemic, to save the most lives and help the most people. Reshape how we do business, rework our economy and the way it runs. Reimagine people in the way that we treat them, in the way that our country treats them. It's a new way of being. That's another way to stop a fortress of the past and instead to become a bridge across troubled waters in the present. Instead of asking others to become just like us, we are being asked together to become something new, something we never perhaps expected. The confusion of the present time could splinter us further into competing groups about how we're going to move forward. That would be the old script that we've been following for decades. It's an old script by many definitions. Building our little political and social camps that are incapable of communicating with one another. Or we can try a new script. We can tell a new story, one about greater collaboration and community building, even as we struggle with social or physical distancing. The irony is that we need to become closer, even as we must temporarily remain apart. How we do that is an unfolding story for the coming months and years. But it is a story that we will recognize from those ancient tales. We just need to not blame God this time. We do not need merely to communicate. We need to try and understand as well as seek to be understood. Not just the words, but the meaning, the intentions, the underlying goals of people, other groups, other souls struggling to find a way through this difficult time. And we need to stop trying to just build everything higher and higher, and instead think about how to build those bridges between, those connections among. We need to grow together as a nation, as a people, with a shared goal of community. And what that will look like is beyond my eyes to see. But it can only begin among us, in those spaces in between. A bridge being built between hearts and minds and souls, because we cannot build a tower up to heaven. But if we build, if we grow, bridges among and between God's children, heaven will find its way to us. So ends the sermon.
Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is trampling out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. He hath loosed the fateful lightning of his terrible swift sword. His truth is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on. He has sounded forth the trumpet that shall never call retreat. He is sifting out the hearts of men before his judgment seat. Oh, be swift, my soul, to answer him. Be jubilant, my feet. Our God is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on. In the beauty of the lilies, Christ was born across the sea, with a glory in his bosom that transfigures you and me. As he died to make men holy, let us die to make men free, while God is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on.
The sermon. We will end in prayer, the prayer of St. Francis. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me so love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. And where there is sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. Amen. Our service is ended. May our service to God and to one another never truly end. Go in peace, my friends. God bless, and be well. Goodbye.